Hello and welcome to News Central TV. I am Queen Celestine. Here are some stories making rounds beyond the continent. We begin the bulletin in the Middle East, where Jordan has accused Israeli settlers of attacking a Gaza-bound humanitarian aid convoy, marking second such incident in recent days. The convoy, carrying 30 trucks loaded with vital aid, was delayed in reaching Gaza, allegedly violating agreements between the parties. Jordanian government spokesman Mohammed al-Momani called on Israel to take firm and immediate action against those obstructing the humanitarian effort, criticizing what he described as insufficient Israeli intervention. And staying in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the defeat of Hamas in Gaza must be completed before the hostages left and can be freed days after a cabinet meeting to discuss an updated war plan. The premier is considering taking full military control of Gaza, even after external pressures insist on him to end the war. However, senior UN officials warned that expanding the fight risked deadly consequences, while others think it's merely a negotiating tactic. Israel citizens have expressed rage over the recent footage of weak and bony captives, while UN experts also warn of emerging famine for Palestinians in Gaza.
The Hamas released video of Israeli hostage Avitar David starving and being forced to dig his own grave in a Hamas tunnel.
I have, yeah. I think it's horrible. I think it's horrible. And I hope a lot of people do get to see it, as bad as it is, because I think it's a horrible thing.
Israel has issued new displacement orders in Gaza, forcing thousands to flee again as fears grow over a possible full occupation of the territory. The Israeli military announced mandatory evacuations in parts of Gaza City and Khan Yunis, describing them as evacuation orders. The new orders come as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to push for full reoccupation of Gaza later this week. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump said any decision on expanded Israeli control rests with Israel. For more on Netanyahu's full plan to take over Gaza, I have Advocate Maurice Hirsch joining me from Jerusalem. Advocate Maurice Hirsch is the director of the Initiative for Palestinian Authority, Accountability and Reform in the Jerusalem Center for Security. Thank you, Maurice, for joining us this evening.
Hey, good evening. Thank you for having me.
Maurice, so the Prime Minister Netanyahu says full occupation of Gaza is necessary for security and to free hostages. Do you believe this is a military necessity or a political move?
Well, so the question really is, what does Israel do in a situation where the genocidal Hamas terrorists continue to hold 50 Israeli hostages, are refusing to negotiate the terms that they have set for any type of further release, are really unacceptable to any of the parties. We saw the ceasefire talks break down just a few weeks ago and Hamas walking away. And they've now made very, very clear that they are looking for a war. They are wanting to sacrifice more of the Gazan people because they refuse to surrender and they refuse to release the hostages. So Israel doesn't really have much of an option. We cannot see the hostages staying another 665 days in the captivity of these genocidal terrorists. And so really Hamas is leaving us with no choice whatsoever rather than to push forward and to ensure that we control the entire Gaza Strip.
And if Israel takes control of all of Gaza, who governs it next? And how realistic is long-term occupation without fueling endless resistance?
Well, so I can tell you quite clearly that obviously it's better for the Gazan people not to be subjected to a genocidal terrorist group, a dictatorial terrorist group that has made their lives hell for the last 20 years. They've been there enforcing their Sharia law. They've been there quashing any type of resistance. They've been there acting as terrorists, acting as dictators, and then they started and launched the October 7 massacre, bringing really a great disaster on the entire Gaza Strip. So I would I would suggest that any other governance other than Hamas is obviously going to be better for the Gazan people, and it will certainly be better for the Israeli people. And that's something I think that we should all together as an international community strive for, looking for the best interest of the Gazan people, and it is not being subjected to this terrorist organization.
We've seen in all this plan that within the Israelis' own military leadership, there's a lot of people pushing against this plan. What's your take on that?
Well, so without question, there are military commanders who have different ideas, different approaches. Some of them would have suggested using more force much earlier. Some of them seek to use more restraint. But it's important to stress that Israel is a democracy. It's a democracy that has an army and not an army that has a country. The decisions for the army are made by the political echelon, by the cabinet. The cabinet will direct them as to what needs to be done. And the army will, as armies should do, salute and say, yes, sir, and march on forward. That doesn't mean that we can't hear other voices. They shouldn't be obviously taken into account. They come with a lot of experience, and they come with possibly with Israel's best interests at heart. And so this thorough discussion is something which I believe is a very, very healthy sign of a strong and robust democracy. And that's what Israel is.
Now, we've seen, videos surfaced, showing Israeli protesters blocking and even destroying aid trucks headed to Gaza. Do you know why this has been allowed to happen?
Well, again, Israel is a democracy. We have a situation where we have the family members of the hostages that are being held by Gaza objecting to the fact that Israel is continuing to supply aid that falls into the hands of Hamas while the hostages are being starved. Why is there a situation? You'll never find another situation in the world where the victim of an unprecedented attack is then required to feed the side of the aggressor. That's something that doesn't exist in the real world. It's only and simply a standard set for the Jewish country. And within the Jewish country, there are people who disagree with that, and they are entitled to go out into the streets, go out onto the roads, and to protest. That's part of democracy.
And lastly, before you go, Morris, we've seen that these protesters claim aid strengthens Hamas, but with the famine worsening, can that argument justify stopping food for civilians?
Well, there really is no famine in the Gaza Strip. That's a fallacy. It's a propaganda campaign led by Hamas and the Qataris backing them. That's why they are showing pictures of children starving, and the pictures that you're showing on the screen now, all choreographed by Hamas for the international press to lap up. It was a way to distract attention away from their refusal to negotiate. What we've seen going into Gaza since the start of the war is 1.5 million tons of food just coming through Israel. What we've seen just since the 26th of May, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation handing out over 108 million meals directly into the hands of the Gazan people. The famine story is a fallacy. It's a lie. I'm sure there are many African countries that would beg to receive the amount of food that has gone into Gaza, and they would never define it as a famine, never define it as starvation, because it's probably more than they're receiving. And yet there seems to be this tendency to identify with the terrorist narrative rather than looking at, unfortunately, at the objective facts.
Thank you so much, Morris, for joining us at this time.
Thank you for having me. Have a good evening.
And away from that, tensions are rising between the United States and India as President Donald Trump has announced new trade measures against New Delhi over its continued purchase of Russian oil. Trump signed an executive order imposing an additional 25% tariff on Indian imports to the United States, bringing the total levy to 50%. The new rates will take effect 21 days from the date of the order. The U.S. president accused India of ignoring the human cost of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. saying the country does not care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. India has dismissed the move as unjustified and unreasonable, warning that the tariffs could escalate tensions between both countries. And tensions are also rising, and the clock is ticking as the Kremlin confirms what it calls constructive talks with a U.S. envoy just days before President Donald Trump's ceasefire deadline for the war in Ukraine. Russia says President Vladimir Putin and U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff met for more than 3 hours in Moscow. According to the Kremlin, both sides exchanged what they called signals about how to move forward. But with Trump's Friday deadline fast approaching, there's still no sign of a breakthrough. The U.S. president has warned that if Russia doesn't take concrete steps towards peace, it will face sweeping new sanctions, including secondary sanctions on nations and companies still trading with Moscow. And staying in Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky recently visited the Sumy region, where he met with soldiers from the 225th Separate Assault Regiment and the 2nd Air Assault Battalion of the 80th Separate Air Assault Brigade. During his visit, he awarded several servicemen with state honors in recognition of their service. Zelensky expressed his gratitude to the troops defending the region, emphasizing the strategic importance of the Sumy section, which borders Russia and has been a front of intense military operations. He discussed battlefield needs with commanders, including requests for more equipment, drones, and support, among other issues. In a dramatic departure from recent health policy, the Trump administration has announced it is terminating more than 20 federal contracts tied to the development of mRNA-based vaccines, the same groundbreaking technology that helped curb the COVID-19 pandemic. The decision, unveiled by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is already sparking concern across the scientific community, given his history of vaccine skepticism. Here's senior international correspondent Efia Hagen with the report.
A technology once hailed as the future of medicine is now facing a major setback. The Trump administration has confirmed that 22 federal contracts supporting mRNA vaccine development will be terminated, a move affecting nearly $500 million in planned spending. The decision was made by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who cited concerns about the technology's effectiveness in preventing upper respiratory illnesses like COVID and flu. The government now says it will shift those funds towards what it calls safer, broader vaccine platforms, alternatives believed to be more resilient as viruses evolve. The cuts impact programs at pharmaceutical giants like Moderna, Pfizer and Sanofi, including Moderna's bird flu vaccine, which the company had already acknowledged was being scaled back. Several pre-award grants and early phase trials are also being cancelled outright. However, late-stage projects will be allowed to continue to protect prior taxpayer investments. The move marks a striking reversal. mRNA vaccines, which use genetic instructions to train the immune system, were developed at record speed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Backed by Operation Warp Speed, they helped reduce global mortality and formed the core of the US vaccine rollout. In 2023, scientists behind the mRNA breakthrough were awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine for their life-saving contribution. But since taking office, Health Secretary Kennedy, long a controversial figure for promoting vaccine misinformation, has overhauled vaccine oversight within the government. He dismissed key scientific advisory panels and launched inquiries into widely discredited claims, including a supposed link between vaccines and autism. Now critics fear that Kennedy's influence is steering public health policy away from science-backed innovation. The administration insists it still supports vaccines, but says it's time to move beyond the limitations of mRNA. Whilst the Trump administration defends the move as a science-based course correction, public health experts are warning of the broader implications. With global pandemics still a real threat, some fear this could stall the very progress that helped the world respond to COVID in record time. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagan.
Let's go on a short break. When we come back, we tell you that France PM laments as wildfire consumes 16,000 hectares in the southern France. Details of this and more after the break. Join us again. We go over to southern France, where the largest wildfire of the summer has triggered a state of emergency. The inferno in the Aude department has burned through more than 16,000 hectares in just 24 hours, an area nearly the size of Paris. Fanned by strong Mediterranean winds and dry conditions, the flames have swept through forests, vineyards, and villages, destroying homes and forcing thousands to evacuate. Firefighters from across the region are battling to bring the blaze under control.
C'est très important pour nous d'être là parce que la catastrophe est une catastrophe d'ampleur inédite. C'était très important parce que des centaines et milliers de personnes se sentent atteintes dans ce qu'elles ont de plus précieux, leurs biens, leurs maisons, leurs vignes. Pour ceux qui travaillent dans le tourisme, le paysage qui est atteint. Et donc c'était après presque 24 heures de combat de tous les pompiers, de tous les soldats du feu, des élus qui sont là et qui n'ont pas dormi de la nuit. C'était très important que nous soyons avec eux. Chaque fois que une partie des Français sont atteints par une catastrophe de cet ordre, la solidarité nationale doit s'exprimer, jouer. Elle a joué à plein parce que les services de l'État et les services de sécurité ont été immédiatement, j'allais dire, dans la minute mobilisés. C'est très important aussi parce que...
Thousands gathered in Hiroshima on Wednesday to mark the 80th anniversary of the first wartime use of a nuclear bomb dropped by the United States on this Western Japanese city in 1945. The uranium bomb, called Little Boy, instantly killed about 78,000 people, with tens of thousands more dying later from burns and radiation exposure. 3 days after Hiroshima, a plutonium bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, leading to Japan's surrender and the end of World War II. Hiroshima was targeted partly because its surrounding mountains were believed to amplify the bomb's destructive force. Commemorations included survivors, officials, and representatives from around 120 countries and territories observing a moment of silence exactly at 8:15 a.m., the time the bomb was dropped. And still on the 80th anniversary commemoration of the atomic bombing of the Japanese city of Hiroshima, Pope Leo XIV on Wednesday dedicated some time to remembering the tens of thousands killed and injured on August the 6th, 1945. During his general audience at the Vatican, the Pope gave his prayers to the people affected, offering words of solidarity to those who have suffered its physical and psychological social consequences.
L'80° anniversario del bombardamento atomico della città giapponese di Hiroshima e fra 3 giorni ricorderemo quello di Nagasaki. Desidero assicurare la mia preghiera per tutti coloro che ne hanno subito gli effetti fisici.
We'll go on a short break. More news when we return. Join us again. Hundreds of thousands of Cambodian workers have fled back home from Thailand after deadly border clashes between two countries. A ceasefire took effect last Tuesday following 5 days of intense fighting over disputed border temples that killed at least 43 people on both sides. On Wednesday, large crowds streamed through the Ban Lam Dong crossing from Thailand's Chataburi province into Cambodia's Battambang. Cambodia's Labour Ministry says more than 750,000 citizens, including children, have returned since the clashes began on July the 24th. And that's all at this hour. Remember, you may send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on your screen. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Queen Celestine.